Hey, good morning, Johnny.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
What about this bike?
Basically, it's a 1971 Triumph, the engine and the front half of the frame. But the rest of it is pretty much stuff that I've made. The front end obviously has a 23-inch front wheel. I actually cut the fork tubes in half up here, and it has no oil or anything in it, but shortened the front end dramatically. Cleaned up the triple trees on it. These are also my bars that I made for it. And then I started with a lowbrow tank this time. Normally I make my own tanks, but gave it the aluminum accents on the bottom. And then stepping into the motor, we started out with the original 71 Triumph 650, and then through Chopperhead with Big Truth, we got a big bore kit and made it a 750, which a friend of ours, Jimmy Varnes, had done the motor for us. He was originally a flat track rider back in the day and sponsored by Triumph, so I completely had the utmost faith in him. I ended up doing a belt drive system on it, opening it up, and I also don't normally like the carburetor on the Triumph right at the tube, so I took and modified the original intake with a 20-degree angle on it so that the carburetor would come off to the side and you could actually get an air cleaner on it instead of the little thin ones. The controls, that's all my setup, because I didn't like the big plates that the Triumphs had on the back of them for motor mounts, so I eliminated that. But I did actually make a larger motor mount on the top. I know a lot of guys take the top motor mounts off of a Triumph, but I eliminated the rear, but made a beefy mount on the top to try and clean up that whole bottom area.
That's cool.
And then the tail section, to keep it with the Triumphs, a lot of guys always bolted a hardtail on them, so I wanted to kind of go that direction. So I made my own hardtail for it to keep the larger wheels. Has a 21-inch rear wheel. To keep the rear wheel in proportion with the bike, I kind of had to stretch it a little bit. But I like to integrate, like, the license plate and stuff is all bolted off the motor. It's not, hanging off of the frame and stuff. The tail light is something that I made from scratch. Rear fender was from scratch also. We used 520 chain. Can't remember whose sprocket that was, but the rear brake system is a setup of mine that I don't think anybody has yet, but the rotor, a Willwood rotor, a vented rotor, and it's a Willwood caliper, and then it has, these are my adapter plates that I make to switch it over to the Harley wheels.
It has to work good because you don't have
very good. It's very good. Oil tank. I made the oil tank to try and, with it being a unit motor, you would have that big huge gap. Everybody makes round oil tanks, or they make a small upright oil tank. I needed something that was going to fill in that gap, so that was my idea for an oil tank. The exhaust is all my exhaust.
This is very nice detail. The exhaust is so nice.
From the first day anyone's seen it, it was kind of like the exhaust was everyone's go-to, because they haven't seen, normally your Triumphs either go under, or it's a shotgun style up top. So the exhaust was a big part of what caught a lot of people's eye for sure. But the bike's got a little bit of history to it that I found out. I can't remember the guy's name, but he was an apprentice with Indian Larry for a little bit. This front half of the frame and the engine were laying at Indian Larry's shop while he was apprenticing there for 2 years, and it was nothing special. When I got a hold of him, he said this was the biggest pile of crap that was laying in the corner, but they made a bike out of it at the time. And somehow my friend, through another friend, ended up with it. And I told him, I said, well, that thing's got some great history to it, so we got to keep at least that front half of the frame, and we got to keep the motor just for the Indian Larry part of it. So I didn't want to really mess with any of that stuff. You know, I could have done a whole complete frame, but I wanted to keep that part of it, the history part of it, alive.
Yeah.
So I thought that part of it was pretty neat.
Okay. It's your first Triumph, I think, huh?
This is my first Triumph build. I don't know, well, I know a lot more about them now. But yeah, this was my very first attempt at building a custom Triumph.